Welcome and thank you for joining today's 10x Growth Accelerator, the PDIS Personal Development Integration System, which is all about establishing elegant and highly effective solutions to the challenge of integrating our major projects and our new initiatives into what is for most a busy schedule. I mean, have you ever had a side project or a bit of personal development or a key piece of learning or a special initiative that you were really intent on, that you really wanted to make happen, but you found that you just didn't have the time, the energy, the willpower, or you had the intention, but you just couldn't get started, or that you could get going, but then the enthusiasm would wane, it would wear off, you would stop, or you could get going, but then maybe resent a little bit of the effort that you have to put in and the things that you have to sacrifice in order to move this forward. Perhaps you find yourself getting going, but then you drift and get distracted. I mean, does any of that sound familiar? Of course it does. And today's session is for those of us who have goals and ambitions, but maybe can't start or can't sustain or maybe drift. So this is for everybody. And I am super excited to deliver this because it was exactly my challenge and it is my client's challenge. So much so that when I started thinking about the 10x growth accelerators that I wanted to share with the community, this was absolutely the first thing that came to my mind. And it's also a founding principle of TSP. You know, we wanted to provide coaching, community and content that actually would make a material difference in the projects and the goals that you wanted to run and wanted to achieve. And to do that, we need great content full of insightful ideas that really inspire and motivate. But we also need to be presenting those things in such a way as to be consumable and doable. You know, we want stuff that really works. We're all of us familiar with stories of unused gym memberships. We've all had the experience of the good intention that we have at the supermarket and we start buying lots of healthy foods only to get to the end of the week and be fishing like rotting salad out of the bottom drawer of the fridge. So we want to avoid all of that and keep to the TSP founding principles of teaching what works and what is 100% doable. So with that in mind, today's session is going to talk about why it's such a challenge to get these important projects going and why it's hard to keep sustaining them and making them work with everything else that's going on. We're going to talk about some of the key mistakes that all of us make, especially top performers, high potential people, people with lots of goals and ambitions. And we're going to turn those common mistakes into some alternative principles and practices for success. Absolutely, we're going to create an approach that is, first of all, practicable. So that's doable. Practical means useful. Practicable means doable. We're going to come up with something that's effective, so lots of bang for buck. And we want something that's really sustainable, so it integrates with all of the other commitments that we have in life and work. And you'll definitely walk away from today's session with everything that you need to go and create a new process. As usual, you'll find a downloadable guide that will really help you to marshal your thinking and bring it all together anytime you start this or want to revisit in the future. So go grab that at the end of today's session and just do the work around that. And let's get into the detail. Now, why is it such a challenge for us to take these key goals, these major projects, these initiatives, these impacts that we want to have, these changes we want to make, these things that are so important to us, and we just can't find a way to weave them into our schedule, to put time and attention into them, to really get these things moving forward? And don't just say, I'm too busy. You know, I can't tell you how many people I work with who, when they first come to me, are just too busy to succeed. And when I share that with them, they're like, I know just what you're talking about. Too busy to succeed, too busy to notice that I'm wasting my best time on low return activities. Too busy to notice that I'm prioritizing the urgent constantly over the important. Too busy to settle into my day. Too busy to create the relationships and the collaborations that are going to really move me forward. Just too busy to succeed. And it's too easy for us to say, you know what, I'm too busy. Or I don't know what to work on, where to focus. I don't know how to do that. I want to tell you here, busyness is laziness. And perhaps you want to write that down. Busyness equals laziness. Aha, insight, complete shift in the perspective. Because when I self-describe as busy, that's me being lazy, just too lazy to create my day, too lazy to rise above the circumstances that have me describing my day as busy. Busyness is laziness. It's a surrender to the outside world and to my schedule and saying everything else that is more important than what I want to focus on. Busyness is laziness. And here's another insight I want to share with you. Busyness is a choice. Busyness is always a choice. And I never have to self-describe as busy. I've got a little challenge for you at this point. I'd love you to look into your calendar for the next 7 days and choose the day that's most chock-a-block, the day that we would otherwise describe as super busy. And what I want you to do here is I want you to give yourself a challenge to move through that day as it's planned, but never self-describing as busy. Okay, I want you to acknowledge that, hey, my calendar is full. My time is completely accounted for. There's a lot of demand on my time. There's a ton of things that I want to achieve, but I'm not busy, and that's my choice. Busyness is laziness. Busyness is a choice, and we want to move forward with a lot more creativity to move above these things that have us describing as busy. And we want to move forward in a choiceful way. So let's start by acknowledging our primary challenge here is prioritization and boldness. This isn't a time management issue. And if it is, time management is a question of prioritization, and time management is a question of boldness. Getting clear on my priorities and then making bold choices about what I give a gracious no to and what I give a wholehearted yes to what I'm going to focus on. Now, we describe these things as too busy, but we're never too busy for something we regard as important enough. So prioritization, boldness, busyness is a choice, and I want to move forward choicefully. Okay, with busyness put to one side, let's talk about the 6 key mistakes that everybody makes in failing to integrate their key goals and their major projects into their standing commitments and their busy schedules. And as I step through these 6 key mistakes, I'd like you just to think a little bit about those which you can be guilty of. And off the back of that, what's the learning? What's the new principle that you want to apply? Mistake number 1 is simply getting overly ambitious. We want to do it all, we want to learn it all, and there's payoff there. We can achieve a great many things, but it's not often sustainable, and we often create really plans that just aren't based in reality. So what we want to do instead here is we want to think about the acupuncture points. What are the high return activities? What gives me the most bang for buck? Where do I need to put my focus? What would give me an unfair advantage in this area? So rather than being very ambitious and doing everything, getting really laser focused like a guided homing missile. Here are the high return things. Here are the acupuncture points. That's where I'm going to put my focus. Second key mistake that we make is that we create plans that are just perfect on paper. I'm sure you've all heard the adage that plans never survive contact with the enemy. We don't want to come up with something that's perfect on paper only to fail in real life. So what we want to do instead is we want to come up with something that's just about good enough and then tweak to perfection. So real world usage that then gives us opportunity to experiment and test and integrate, and we tweak from there. Now, the third mistake that we make is to go to the other extreme. And we think, well, this will just happen. I'll just squeeze it in somehow. Somehow I will make this happen. But we need to plan. We need to be targeted and focused like that laser-guided missile. Else we just flounder. The fourth key mistake is that we try to carve out and then wait for long blocks of time. I need a big segment of time. I need 2 hours or 4 hours to really get into this. But how often do most of us have these big segments of uninterrupted time? It's quite rare. We can work towards that, and some of you maybe have a little more control over your days, your weeks, your calendar that allows for that than some of us who might be more in the corporate world. But regardless of that, we're looking for little and often. We want to be thinking about compound effects. We want to be thinking about things that move us forward in a 15-minute or 30-minute, 45-minute segment, not 2, 3, 4 hours. And I want to be really targeted in that time. I want to think about what is the high return activity. And today I'm going to be introducing you to an idea that I call the 30-minute accelerator, something that can really move me forward when I've got a spare 15, 20, 30 minutes on my calendar. Mistake number 5 is that we like to think of all of this work as something very different from our regular work. We create this very black and white, disparate, polarized world. Here is my special project over here, and here's everything else that's going on. But when I do that, I create this very unrealistic view of the world that doesn't really work, it doesn't really sustain. So what we want to do is we want to find opportunities to, first of all, make our project look and align with everything else that I'm already doing in my days and my weeks. And secondly, we want to find opportunities to practice in the real world. If I'm learning new skills, if I'm pushing my project forward, There'll be some activities in there that require practice for me to really hone these skills. I want that practice to be out there in the real world, in public, so it's the same as my regular work. It's not some extra thing that I need to do, some extra pain that I've got to I need to find ways to fit that in. I want it to become an integral part of my day and my week. So we want regular routines and habits, and we want to be practicing in the real world. And the sixth big mistake that we make, and this is a big one, is that we just think, well, I haven't got the discipline for that. And when a client says to me, I just don't have the discipline to do these things, Dan, they're talking about a definition of discipline equals willpower. And we all know that willpower is a very exhaustible resource, and towards the middle to end of the day, we're really waning. The kids come and ask you for something in the morning, it's a flat no. They come and ask you in the afternoon, it's like, oh, go on then. Because my discipline, my willpower is slipping there. So we want to redefine discipline. Discipline equals systems. This is a key principle inside TSP Academy. We teach systems because they're incredibly robust and incredibly effective. They're very high performant. So we're going to be talking about that today, but I'd love you for now to write down discipline equals systems. Anytime you feel that you don't have the discipline to achieve the thing that's in front of you, think of it in terms of systems. What's the system that I'm missing here? What could I systematize to near guarantee success? Now, why do we make these mistakes? Well, oftentimes it's our ambition and excitement. We want to go for it. We want to get things done. No waiting around. I want to get rich quick. I want to make this thing happen. I want to create this result. And that's admirable, but that can create these mistakes and they lead to us not moving our projects forward. Other times it's the opposite. We fear the hardship, the struggle. This is going to be difficult. It's going to take a long time. It's going to be a lot of effort. And so we don't want to start. We want to avoid the work. And these mistakes are a great way to do that. But of course, the problem here is that our projects don't start. They don't progress. Our learning and development takes a back seat. Our special initiatives take a permanent back seat. They never come off the shelf. And we don't create the results and the changes that we want to see. We don't create transformation. And that's why we're here in TSP Academy, to move these things forward. So we want to move beyond these mistakes and create something that is a completely different approach, something that will really work for us. So to that end, what we're going to do today is first of all start by letting go of that idea of busy. I just want you to drop that label right now. I never want to self-describe as busy. I'm not busy. That's my choice. My time is completely accounted for, but I'm not busy. So I can really allow myself to rise above the circumstances and really focus on what's most important to me, as opposed to what is urgent or what are other people's goals. Today, we're going to be achieving clarity on where to place the focus, and we're going to create some integration by working with your calendar, some systems, some tools, the ecosystem, and how best to overcome the most common obstacles. And our themes today are clarity and integration. It's not so much today for us to talk about time management. It's more about a mindset shift and then some principles and practices that we can apply across the board. So I want you to really be focused today on creating a setup and a system that works for you. I'm going to have some ideas that I want to share, but feel free to tweak where necessary and make it something that really works for you and your calendar. So let's get into the details right now. So let's start building your system for integrating your key projects and your learning and development efforts. And whatever you're bringing to today's session, whether it's a project, it's a goal, it's an ambition, it's something very specific that you want to learn or develop, if it's a point of growth, all of those efforts, all of those initiatives will apply here, because we're talking about integration at the highest level. So whatever your project, whatever your focus area, bring that into today's session and create a system around it. And a little note before we start, we could go to town here. We could come up with all sorts of tactics and strategies and just load ourselves up with a lot of information and a lot of things to go away and do. But that's going to be unhelpful, because we're just going to become overwhelmed and overloaded. So today we're going to keep it super simple and just keep ourselves to the gold dust. So our key starting point here is clarity. I want you to start with the very basic question. What's the goal here? What are the outcomes that I'm shooting for? We can all be guilty of, just wandering in to various goals and projects, especially if it's a side hustle, especially if it's a bit of learning and development. We kind of wander in without a lot of forethought and planning. We love the idea of having this new skill, but then we find ourselves with outputs that we don't really want, or having invested time in something that's not really worth the effort. So I really want you to think, what are the goals? What are the outcomes? What is this for? Why is it good? And if I had it, would I want it? I love that question. I share it with people in my sessions all the time, and their first thought is like, of course I do, because that's why we're here talking. But then they start to think, okay, there's a bit of effort involved in this. Is it worth that? If I really had it by the end, if I launched myself into the future and I have this thing that I've said is my goal, would I want it? It's a lovely little litmus test to make sure that we're focused on the right things. The other key element about clarity is if I'm just here for the work, if I'm just doing the learning, or if I'm just moving through the process of the project, that's not in itself that motivating after a while. It doesn't really sustain. So we want a reason. We want some kind of value, some kind of virtue behind this, and that's where our goals and our outcomes come in. So key starting point here, clarity. What's the goal? What's the outcome? So let's focus on goals and outcomes to begin with. What results would you love to create here? Why are you investing this time? What's worth the effort that you're about to make? This is the first area to get absolutely clear on, the goals and the outcomes. The second element that we want to get really clear on, crystal clear on, is the high return activities and the key outputs. You've got a goal set now. You've said, here are my goals, these are the outcomes I'm looking for. Now what I'd love you to do is turn this into a project. You know, the word project, just that word alone brings the whole thing to life. We've suddenly got some structure, a bit of a framework. We've maybe got some requirements, some success criteria, some milestones that we're going to work to. We're going to really work this project. And the quickest way to turn a goal into a project is to think, what are the high return activities here? What's the 20% that gets me 80% return? What really makes a difference? And think about the key outputs, not just the assets, but the strategically significant outputs. In the course of any project, think of a project you've worked on recently. There are a ton of things that we turn out, but there are only maybe 3, 4, 5 things that are absolutely there to make the material difference. So what are your high return activities and what are the strategically significant outputs that really represent success inside this project? So for example, let's say you've got a goal that's improving your public speaking. And as we've talked about, let's get some clarity about the outcome. Why is this good? What's behind this? Well, I want to deliver engaging talks in showcase moments to really amplify my team leadership, really contribute to the guys in the team and help them to move their projects, their careers forward. And I want to work towards my own promotion. There's my key goal and outcome. That's what's behind this endeavor to improve my public speaking. And then when I start to think about some high return activities, well, there's a skill development piece there. Maybe I need to really focus on creating engagement or having a great opening or looking after my confidence. I want to look for opportunities to practice. That's a high return activity because I know this is a skill that I don't just need to read about. It's like playing the piano. I can go to all the seminars I want. I can read all the books I want, but I need to actually play the piano if I'm going to get good at this. So same with so many of our skills in the workplace, public speaking being a great example. I need to practice. So a high return activity here would be opportunities to practice. That goes on my list. Getting feedback from people that I admire, getting feedback from people who know what's required. That would be a high return activity. And some of the strategically significant outputs, the key things the assets that I need to create might be a templated framework for how I give a talk, how I open it, how I take people on a journey through the middle, and how I conclude in a really strong way with big calls to action or maybe shifting people's beliefs. Another key output that might be very useful is a defined list of thought leadership topics. I'm going to sit and figure out what are the key topics that I want to become known for, that I want to become a specialist in. What are going to be the real anchor points for me? So there's a few examples of taking a broad goal, a broad learning development goal like public speaking, getting some clarity around the outcome and why this is good, what it's for, and then thinking about high return activities like certain skills to develop or key outputs that I want to create, like a framework for how I give my talks. So we're starting to get a bit of clarity here on our goals, our high return activities, and our strategically significant outputs. Third element then to our overarching first element of clarity is to get your hit list really working. I love to call it my hit list because it's surgical in its precision. And the benchmark here is if you had 15, 20, maybe 30 minutes free on your calendar, could you make meaningful progress on your projects? I alluded to this earlier. I love to have this idea that if I had 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes free, let's say somebody cancels a meeting at the last minute, I've got to run to the doctor's down, sorry, I'll have to skip our meeting. Could I make use of the 30 minutes I've just been gifted? It's such a great benchmark to figure if we've got something that if we have the time, I would know exactly where I'm going to apply my attention and what's going to move me forward. So on my hit list, first of all, I want some initiating actions for my high return activities and my strategically significant outputs. We've got a little list going of high return activities, of key outputs. What's the initiating action? What is action number one? This idea is so useful. I remember a client session years ago and I said something around, okay, what would action number one be? And at the end of our session, I asked her, what's been the key insight today? What's been most useful? And she said, action number one. Now, I'd said it without too much thought, but she had turned it into this beautiful strategy. You can, reduce any complex project, any complex activity or competency into action number one, the thing that really kicks it off. So that's the first element that we want on the hit list. I've got these big high return activities, these key outputs I want to create. Okay, what is the action that kickstarts that? That goes on my hit list. The second element that I'd love you to put on your hit list, I'd call the 30-minute accelerator. Now, I'd love you to define a few 30-minute accelerators that will really move your goals, your outcomes, your key projects, your learning development efforts, really move those forward. What do we mean by a 30-minute accelerator? It's something that is a mini project. It kind of fits inside half an hour and it will really move you forward. It's a mini project because it's maybe got a few moving pieces, but I can execute that and get it done inside a 30-minute window. And when I do, I'll feel good about it and I will have moved things forward. Now, an example from our public speaking example earlier on is researching a reading list. That's something that's going to take a little bit of time, and I can come out of that activity with a really solid reading list and the very first thing that I'm going to read when I step into the next 30-minute block that I have. 3 calls to leadership, to my leadership inside the company, offering to lead some seminars internally. I know I've got this output and these return activities, high return activities of running seminars or practicing in public. Okay, I want to make a few calls to some key leaders around the organization and to offer a bit of time to do that. That's a 30-minute accelerator. I could sit for 30 minutes, brainstorm 3 to 5 names, get on the phone, talk to them about what I'd like to do and get some agreements. That's a 30-minute accelerator. Another one would be creating a learning plan. And this is great because, a great example, because if you've got a project, if you've got something you want to move forward, but you don't really know exactly what to do, add a 30-minute accelerator on your list that's called Create the Plan. Okay? Don't wait to dream up a plan or think I need I need an hour or two to really think about the things that I'm going to do around this big project or this piece of learning that I want to move forward. Just put on your list a 30-minute accelerator, 30-minute time-boxed activity to create the plan. Almost any topic can be reduced to a broad strokes plan, and you'll feel so good about having a high level view of what you're going to work on. So let's create a hit list that is surgical in its precision and has 2 elements: initiating actions and these 30-minute accelerators, these little mini projects that really move me forward and move my project forward, that sit inside any 30-minute window that I might be spared by a change in the schedule or a gap between appointments. And the benchmark here is if you had 15, 20, 30 minutes spare, could you make progress? So our first big element was clarity, getting clear on the goals and the outcomes, the high return activities and key outputs, and creating something of a hit list that's almost surgical in its precision with initiating actions and 30-minute accelerators that really move us forward. The next element is integration. That's our next big theme today. And if this is to be sustainable, everything that we come up with needs to really dovetail with our standing commitments, our regular schedule, and all the other draws that we have on our time. And the first thing I'd like you to do is encourage you to really make everything that you're doing here look like regular work. We often consider this is something very separate, and our projects, they are special undertakings. But when we have them as 2 very distinct things, it really blocks integration and getting things done. We just hold them as separate in our minds, and it doesn't aid integration. It doesn't aid dovetailing this in. It doesn't aid just jumping into it. I think we need all this special time and big blocks of uninterrupted deep work time that's just not going to be on our calendars. So let's not think of this as separate. Let's encourage ourselves to really think of this as just regular work. It's just part of my day that's going to weave in. And it's also important to do that because we want to do all of our learning and all of our projects in context. If the learning is just in the classroom, it then doesn't translate and it doesn't respond to the frictions in everyday life and all the things that come up. It's this idea of putting a plan into motion and then tweaking to perfection. It'll never be perfect on paper, then translating to the real world. The real world won't want to cooperate. So it's really useful here to make our projects look like regular work because then everything happens in context. So what we're going to do here to get sustainable and dovetail everything in and really create integration is work with 4 key areas. We're going to work with the calendar, we're going to work with systems, we're going to work with tools, and we're going to work with the ecosystem. And the first area is to think about calendar management. And here we've got 2, maybe 3 options. And first thing we could do is we could just set aside a set time each day and each week. And that's great. The brain loves the consistency. It'll create some routine and habit. There'll be some expectation there. So every morning or every Tuesday and Wednesday, these are my days or my times for projects. Second option is we can carve out time each week. At the beginning of the week, or better yet, at the end of the week before, look into the week ahead, you can decide where you've got time blocks, where you've got enough available time to move your projects forward. That's the way most of us are going to do these things. We're going to either have a set time, that's one of the best ways, or we're going to carve out time each week. The third way is to make a commitment to use any free blocks that you have. And this personally is my favorite. I find it's the most pliable, the most malleable, the most flexible, but it's a little bit dangerous because I'm going to go into the week saying, I'm just going to use whatever free time I've got. That's getting pretty close to saying this really important project is just going to be something I do off the edge of my desk, and everything else is going to take over and consume all the time that I've got. So it needs a lot of systematized discipline and some real boldness that we talked about to hold my boundaries. What I personally love to do is clarify the work blocks that I have in the week. I know what my standing commitments are. Where are there gaps in that? Now, whichever of these 3 options that you choose, to have a set time each day and week, whether to carve out time independently each week, depending on what your calendar looks like, or just to make this commitment to using free blocks of time, any free block that comes up, here's my hit list, this is what I'm going to apply to it. The key ingredient here is always commitment. And what you'll notice is commitment is a combination of a decision and a boundary that needs to be held. With any high performers, with any people who are really achieving, anytime you have really moved things forward, commitment has been a decision. It's not like I might be committed. It's not trying. It's a decision. It's absolutely decided. You can take that to the bank, guaranteed, and then holding the boundary. Now, if that's not happening for you, if you're finding some challenges, what I'd love you to do is think about what's the decision that's not being made here. What is the decision that I'm not making? Or what's the decision I'm making in another direction? That might give you another angle to think about how to use your time and maybe undo some of the kryptonite that means you're not working on your key projects. You might also like to think about how you're doing the slipping of boundaries. In that moment where you could work on your project or go on to an email or some distraction or the next meeting, what's the strategy you've got in place that slips those boundaries? Pay attention to that, bring it into awareness, and create a system that will counter that strategy that just isn't working for us. So key ingredient, the commitment, which is a combination of decision plus boundary. Another quick tip I want to give you when we think about calendar management and where to place our key projects in our learning and development is to really consider the energy element. When are you at your best? When are you firing on all cylinders? Because that's where we want to carve out the time. It's no good carving out time at 11 o'clock at night when I know I've had an exhausting day and I've just got nothing left to give. So many people I work with follow exactly that strategy. Here's the slot I think would work, but there's no energy there. And then they're complaining and upset that things aren't moving forward. Of course they're not. So when are you at your best? That's where you want to create the commitment, the decision, the boundary to say, this is what I'm going to work on. This is my key time. It's going to get the attention is going to go to my key project. And the final secret around calendar management, don't wait to put things on the calendar. Most people don't add something to their calendar until they know what they're going to do. I often say to a client, like, just put 30 minutes on the calendar. And they'll say, yeah, but I don't know what to do with it. It doesn't matter. Just get the time on the calendar. I can near guarantee that if you just put 30 minutes on the calendar, either you'll figure out what to do between now and when you've got that slot on the calendar, because your mind will relax and you'll come up with some great ideas, or you'll get to that 30 minutes, you'll settle into that time, and you'll come up with what needs to happen in that time. You'll come up with the solutions. You'll just get on and do it. So let's not fall into the trap of thinking, I can't put time on the calendar until I know exactly what I'm going to do with that time. Just get the time on the calendar, make this a new practice, a new habit, a new golden rule that you just set. When I've got something that needs to be a little bit of focus, I put 30 minutes on the calendar and I don't wait to think what's going to go into that. I just know that I'm going to need that time and I'm going to reserve that time block. So after today's training, what I'd love you to do is just take a little bit of time to reflect on the approach to calendar management that you want to use. Maybe you want to experiment with all three. Maybe you know one's far more likely to work than another. That's what you're going to commit to. So just reflect on the approach that you want to use. And as per some of our principles that we've talked about today, don't make it perfect on paper. Get it just about good enough. Start with something, anything, and then review and tweak from there. I love to do this with diet and nutrition in particular. I never set out my stall and say, this is the new diet I'm going to run. I always just start and then I tweak from there and get it just right. And by the end of the week, it's perfect. So review and tweak. Don't get perfect on paper. Get it out there, get it in the real world and see what integrates. Okay, so that was our first area, calendar management. Second key area, systems. I've been talking a lot about systems. I'm sure you've heard me talk about it before, but let's just go back to some basics. What do we mean by a system? So a system is a setup in the real world, most likely, that near guarantees time, attention, and success on the key things that we want to move forward, and most often the fundamental components of a goal or a project or a task that I want to move forward. And it's something I can really lean on. You know, I don't need to think very hard about my system. I don't need to will myself to do it. It's a system, it's set up, it's ready to go. The example is I want to get up and get out of the house early morning for the gym. So my system is going to include my alarm clock, having my gym gear out the night before, making agreements with my workout partner, so there's a bit of an accountability piece there, having my routine predefined and written in my little black book, so when I get to the gym, I don't waste any brain power, no friction, no startup inertia. I know exactly what I'm working on. That's a system, and almost everything can be systematized. So my key question for you today is, what systems do you need to put in place to support your integration? You know that you've got these key goals, you've got high return activities, you've got a hit list. You've started to carve out time in the calendar with one or two or three of those different approaches we've talked about. What systems do you now need to put in place to support your integration? You know, present you has these great intentions. Future you is going to struggle with some of them. Procrastination, things are going to get in the way, I don't feel comfortable doing that, all sorts of things. So let's anticipate some of the challenges that future you is going to face. And let's put in place the systems that makes the success near inevitable. Now, I'd love you to come up with the systems that you require, but to help you here, I want to give you 4 that will really serve as your core. So 4 systems for success. And the first is around that energy piece again. What do you need to set up? What do you need to have in place that will guarantee you have the energy to deliver on this project? You cannot give what you don't have. You've got a project like a piece of learning or a key, maybe a side hustle or a business you want to get started. You need the energy to do that. So what systems will give you that energy? Think about self-care. Am I getting enough sleep? Diet and nutrition, exercise, meditation, reflection time, and so on. And think about the timings of where you're doing things, where you're putting these time blocks that you're going to spend on your project. So if you're best in the morning, I need to put in some systems in place that make sure I've got time in the morning. Maybe some other things that were previously in the morning need to be relegated into the afternoon or the end of the day. Maybe admin and catch-up work that doesn't need a lot of brain power goes right to the end of the day. I just do that the last 30 minutes of my day at my desk because it doesn't require a lot of thinking about. It's just something I need to churn through. So I want to have a system in place that guarantees that I'm spending my best time and my highest energy moments on my key projects. So that's the first system, thinking about energy. Second system I'd like you to put in place is to create a pre-game ritual. Every time you sit down to work on your key project or your bit of learning, what's the ritual that you want to step through that guarantees you're going to make effective use of the time? Let's say I've got a 30-minute window. Well, I want a pre-game ritual that says, okay, I'm going to silence my phone. I'm going to turn off my email. I'm maybe going to have a specially reserved area in the house or at the office or a favourite coffee shop, or somewhere I go that really helps me to get focused. And I'm going to clear the space. If you've not heard me talk about that before, go check out the self-coaching toolkit, which you'll find in the TSP Masterclass library. But clearing the space is really just about, what's on my mind, how am I feeling about that? I'm going to jot those things down. I'm going to park them. I'm going to give myself permission to let go of those so I can really focus. So a system here is your pre-game ritual that you're going to design that really gets you in the zone to focus on the project or the piece of learning that's in front of you. Next key system I'd love you to put in place is to commit to a weekly review, track and plan session. So once a week, maybe 15 minutes on the calendar to ask yourself what's gone well in the week that's just been and what maybe needs a change. From there, I'd love you to track your progress, and there's an opportunity for another system. How can you gamify this project that you're working on? How can you gamify your learning? Let's say you want to become a public speaker. Let's say you notice that the high return activity here is the opportunity to practice in public. Okay, well, I'm going to create a little tally sheet. I'm going to put it up on the board, and I'm going to keep a track of how many talks that I give inside a week. And I'm going to go for 3, but it doesn't matter. My tally sheet is going to let me know that this week I didn't do any, or I only did 1. Okay, it's okay. I'm going to double down for next week, and the week after I suddenly get to 2 or 3, and then I'm doing 4 or 5 opportunities to really speak in front of a group. Maybe it's a town hall, but maybe it's a team meeting, or maybe it's a client opportunity. So how can I gamify this and then just keep that on track by tracking progress and having a little tally sheet? So review what's gone well, what needs to change, track the progress, and then inside this weekly review, plan the week to come. What's your new hit list? What are the new actions, the new 30-minute accelerators that you want to use? And what's your new time approach? How are you going to approach this week? Are you going to carve up time on a per day basis? Are you going to have very set times every day or every part of the week? Are you going to be a lot more free-flowing, as I mentioned in that sort of third option? I just know what my time blocks are. Here's my hit list. So commit to a weekly review, track and plan session. Plan the week to come with your new hit list. That's your next system for success. And the final system I want to share with you today is an end of day stock take. You've got your weekly review, track and plan session in the calendar. At the end of each day, I'd love you just to take stock. How did I do today? Maybe give yourself a little score, 1 to 7, 7 being awesome, 1 being not so. Just give yourself a little score to get the internal feedback loop going. And this is a great opportunity to intention set for tomorrow. Okay, I want to set my intentions for the day to come because that really removes any decision fatigue and any startup inertia. If I can go to bed knowing exactly what I'm going to focus on tomorrow, my brain can start to work on it. And when I come in the next day, I'm bang, straight into it. It's a really effective technique. So 4 systems for success: a system to manage my energy, a system to pre-game my focus and attention so I can be really effective, a system to commit to a weekly review, track and plan session, and a system around an end of day stock take. Now, the third key area I want to share with you is tools. And this is pretty straightforward. What tools do you need? What tools do you need to have to hand to really be successful? You've figured out some clarity elements. You've got your calendar working. You know what your systems for success are. What are the tools that are going to support you? First one is your calendar. Maybe it's electronic, but maybe you also want something that's paper-based. Your journal, or something that gives you a space to reflect when you're in a reflection moment or a meditation session, or you have some great ideas. Where are those going? I'd love you to create a battle board. Have that in your tool set. Battle board is up on the wall, or it's a flip chart. I'm just looking to the side. Mine's here. I've got one on the wall over there as well. And that's where I keep track of the big picture. What are the big things I'm working on? And what are the key projects that need to be moving forward? So I continually raise my thinking to the top level and get a really good overview. You might also like to have in your toolkit a dedicated notebook just for this project or just for this learning. It means that every time you go into a work block, every time you run your pre-game ritual to get really focused, your mind is also going to this dedicated space that's for this special project. It'll help you create the shift in your mind to really focus. And the final thing I want to mention under the topic of tools is the anti-tool called your phone. Switch that off. Be really deliberate about having a bit of a sunset on technology, on being dialed in, being connected, being on social media. Just let all that stuff go so you can really have highly effective, highly focused time for these 30-minute accelerators and key initiating actions. And the fourth area I want to share with you is the ecosystem. You know, none of our goals happen in isolation. They all exist in an ecosystem, a sort of complex web of everything that fits together. And it's always been one of my favorite analogies for any kind of project that we would have. It's like a plant. You can't make it grow, but you can create the perfect environment in which it has the best chance to flourish. So think about your goal like it's a plant, and think about the ecosystem like the environment around it. How can I create the kind of ecosystem that gives my projects the best chance of succeeding? So what changes need to occur in your ecosystem? And two useful questions that you can ask here is to think around the ecosystem, things like your environment, your habits, the people around you, your setup, your office, everything that surrounds your goals. And just think, what's supporting me in this area? And what's holding me back? What's inhibiting me? What's getting in the way? And with that, you can really think about the things that you need to dial up and the things that need to be eradicated, removed, or delegated. Now, we've already covered a few key areas in the ecosystem like schedule, tools, and systems. I want to give you three more areas. And the first is your environment setup. Take a look at your desk, take a look at your office, the places that you normally work. Have you got the tools and the systems that you need? What's supporting you in this area and what's maybe getting in the way? When you sit down to a 30-minute accelerator or to get really focused, what do you notice is maybe missing? What are you hunting around for? What is it a bit of a pain that I just don't have what I need right here, right now? Second area inside the ecosystem I'd love you to look at is think about habits. You know, what are the habits that are really supporting you right now? And what are some of the habits that are maybe getting in the way or that maybe need to shift? My coaching challenge here is to change up 3 habits in service to your project or to your new learning endeavor. You've got some goals and outcomes that you want to achieve. To help you with that, what would be 3 great habits to upgrade or elevate and just to dial those in? And the final part of the ecosystem I'd love to share with you is people. Okay, we have people around us who can support us. There's people who are also a bit of a distraction. So what are some of the agreements that are needed with the people around you, the people you're going to collaborate with, and the people who need to know that you're now focused on this project? So what I'd love you to do, especially with this particular element, is get to the workbook and use that to help you review the ecosystem. To think about your schedule, tools, systems, but also the environment setup, the habits and the people that you need to arrange so that your project, your new learning endeavor has the most chance of success. So there we've looked at the calendar, systems, tools, and the ecosystem. And the final piece I want to share with you is overcoming obstacles. And you might like to ask yourself here, what are the likely obstacles? What's likely to get in the way? What can I anticipate is going to be a problem? Now, as we covered at the beginning of our training today, it's very easy to say, I'm just too busy, or I'm not sure what to focus on, not sure how to do this, maybe I don't feel like it, I'm not making enough progress. And most of those will be dealt with by our process. If you stay focused on the process rather than the outcome, it's going to deal with most of those obstacles. You also have the option to turn pro. You can turn pro on almost anything. And turning pro is just not being led by my mood, not dictating my day on, do I feel like doing this? Do I feel like doing that? But being a professional, turning pro. Know that you always have the opportunity to just turn pro, to let go of the mood and really focus on what needs to be done. And what I invite you to do, alongside the question of what are the likely obstacles, is to think, what is my primary kryptonite? What's the thing that's really going to get in the way here? What's the one thing that I do that I just know leads to so much of the procrastination or the perfectionism or not getting started or not finishing? What's really the kryptonite, my personal kryptonite that gets in the way of my projects? And what I'd love you to do here is create a system to deal with that, create a system in the opposite direction. When I talk to people about creating systems, I love them to create systems that really go to the high return activities, the real success ingredients of their project. I love them to come up with systems that really elevate their self-concept, but I also love to give them the challenge of what's the system that gets rid of your kryptonite. So for example, it could be an accountability partner. That's a key system I want to put in place. Or, I get stuck on what to focus on. So I'm going to, I have a system around creating my list, working the calendar, and priming the actions that I tend to get stuck on, or I tend not to want to focus on. So let's create a system that really deals with the kryptonite. And if you need more ideas on that, I'd love you to drop the question into the chat roll, because this is a great topic. Maybe it's something we need to deal with in an upcoming live session. So in terms of overcoming your obstacles, focus on the process, turn pro, not be led by mood, but just get into the process, the actions that you're going to focus on. Think about the likely obstacles, think about your primary kryptonite, and then think about a system that you could put in place that will take care of that. Okay, so there we have a simple but powerful process to reprioritize and strategize your success with our key themes of clarity and integration. We started by letting go of self-describing as busy. I'm not busy, and that's my choice. I'd love you to take that into the busiest day that you've got coming up. We then changed up our approach by getting strategic and systematic. And I'd love you to be thinking about how I can do my projects little and often, how I can benefit from the compound effects, how I can get laser focused. And we did all that through our key theme of clarity. Clarity on the goals and the outcomes, the high return activities and the key outputs that we're looking for, and then having a bit of a hit list of initiating actions and 30-minute accelerators. And we looked at integration, carving out time on the calendar, using 4 key systems around energy, a pre-game ritual, weekly review, and an end-of-day routine. And then thinking about some of the tools, clearing out the ecosystem, and taking action on our primary kryptonite to really clear out any objections, any obstacles. And before we finish, I'd love you just to take a moment to consider what's been your key insight today. What is the most important piece of learning that's maybe changed your mind on how you approach integrating your projects and learning? What's the biggest opportunity for change that you see and that you're now most excited to go away and implement straight after today's session? And what new commitment are you making to yourself? And what is your very next action to get going and start creating momentum around the ideas that we've shared today? I hope you've enjoyed today's session as much as I've enjoyed delivering it. Please download the accompanying PDF and work through the process. And don't forget to put any questions and comments in the chat roll, plus any hashtag wins. We love to hear about your successes. I look forward to seeing you in our next session. Until then, bye for now.